y'all ready?
Yep, we're good.
Ready? Yeah. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Jake Spano. I'm the mayor here in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, and I just want to start by thanking you all for coming. Today, tragically, we had yet another anti-Semitic act in our community, a threat of violence against one of our pillar institutions, Beth Synagogue. Joined by folks who will be able to give you some more detail on that, but I just wanted to say that before even I knew that this was going on, the Jewish community in St. Louis Park was in touch with our police department to activate action plans to keep everyone safe. And I think that the big takeaway for me right now is maybe confidence is the best word I can think of using, that our police department and the Jewish community in St. Louis Park have developed over the years a tight relationship and coordination around these sorts of threats. So as tragic as this may be, they will not diminish the Jewish community in St. Louis Park, and I say that as somebody who is not a member of the Jewish community, but certainly represents a lot of them, and so we're looking forward to the ongoing investigation, getting to the bottom of this, finding and prosecuting the person who did this. So with that, I'll introduce Steve Hunegs from JCRC.
I'm Beth, Walzer, the medical director at Beth. Our primary goal is to serve our community and our congregation. And as we were informed last April, defamation about the threat that came in from them, we are very grateful for our relationship with the city of St. Louis Park and JCRC. Steve will talk in a moment. Jewish Community Relations Council to be able to navigate local and federal authorities to make sure that the investigation continues and that we're able to our congregation. This doesn't stop our ability to serve our community, so we want to make sure that it's known that our community is still vibrant, we're still serving, we're still making sure that we're there for our congregants, our rabbis, our cantors, our clergy, and our leadership, we're all there for them, even though we are virtual today and tomorrow. But we look forward to continuing to see the investigation through, and again, are grateful for the partnership to make sure that we can leverage expertise like Stephen and Steve provide to make sure that things are safe for our
Thanks, Mayor Jake, Mayor Spano, Matt, Dale, Dr. Smith. I'm Steve Hunegs. I'm the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council in Minnesota and the Dakotas. I'll echo Jake's thanks. Thanks for covering the story. You know, it's difficult. This is important news for to understand and assimilate at this time. It's Friday afternoon. It's the Sabbath. We say Shabbat Shalom, peaceful Sabbath to people. We're in the middle of our high holy days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So keeping in mind, there's a lot of reasons to smile if you're an American Jew. I always tell people that there's never been a better time to be an American Jew than, say, September 2021. That does not mean, however, that we don't appreciate the fact that there are pathological, malicious anti-Semites who do things like send threats via the email portal about Bethel Synagogue and happens to be my synagogue too. I want to say huge thanks to the city of St. Louis Park. My family moved to St. Louis Park in 1949 and been a continuous presence ever since then. And the relationship with GCRC, law enforcement, all cities, and many of St. Louis Park services is outstanding. And Jake, as you know, the partnership with Jews and our community, many other Jewish institutions are working in St. Louis Park. The community will remain vigilant on the watchwords of the day, working with all levels of law enforcement, local and federal, our national partner, Secure Community Network, as well as ADL Midwest, our regional partner. It's good to know that all of the pieces of the law enforcement realm, the Jewish community security realm, are working together very well. It's important that intimidation and oppression not carry the day to the extent that that's possible. At the same time, the synagogue can have to take all prudent precautions to make sure that everyone is safe at all times. I just want to say to everybody that's gathered that the Jewish community is very vibrant. We see our work on behalf of all communities in terms of community security. You might note that we just had a vandalism incident at the Cultural Center at University Avenue in St. Paul. So we're very well aware that attacks on other cultural institutions are also with West Valley in 2017, that we're all together that an attack on one institution is an attack on all institutions. It's important to keep this in mind because we all stand together in something like that. Thank you very much.
What can you tell us about the nature of the threat? Was it like a bomb threat, a shooting threat? What type of violence are we dealing with here?
Well, I think it's an ongoing investigation, right? So details will sort of come forward, I think, over time. But the understanding was the threat was posted on an online message board that was then directed, it was sort of more general, to a Bethel Synagogue, which then was clarified by this person to mean St. Louis Park's Bethel Synagogue. Outside of that, I don't have any more information about the details of what was said in the message.
And do you know if there's any reason to believe that it was a credible threat?
I couldn't answer that at this time.
And do you know if there have been any arrests or any leads as far as who made the threat?
Not that I'm aware of at this point.
Can someone talk about the safety plans for today and tomorrow? We saw a bunch of police out front of the synagogue and maybe some surveillance units.
Yep. So we have a detailed plan that we work through with our Jewish community for instances just like this, and they involve different sort of actions depending on the nature of the threat. In this case, we've got direct patrols that are visiting the Jewish Community Center, the JCC, and some of the schools in our community and other synagogues. So it will vary from time to time what the nature of the threat. Obviously, we've got a lot of, it's the beginning of the school year as well, so there's a lot of kids going in and out of schools this morning, this afternoon, and we'll be keeping a close eye on those. But we also then, especially for this time of year and on a Friday, as folks enter Sabbath, we have a really developed network of messaging and communication that our police department in the city works with folks in the Jewish community who may not necessarily be using their phones, right, or answering a landline or their cell phone, to make sure that awareness is spread throughout the community about those threats. So that's a long-standing piece of our sort of emergency management plan, our police department.
Maybe a question for some of the synagogue leaders, but how many preschoolers attend the preschool and how many people normally attend services on a day like today and tomorrow? So how many people overall are kind of impacted by this?
Sure, we have a preschool, very robust. We have approximately 120 kids in our preschool, and our general congregation have post-COVID and entered getting back in person has been anywhere from 75 to a couple hundred in person. And non-COVID times it's been closer to 300 to 400 a week. And so again, I'll state again, as both gentlemen behind me stated, in terms of lack of intimidation, we'll continue to serve those people. We have a robust cyber tool that can provide services remotely, but that's how things are impacted in person.
Sorry to dominate the conversation here, but have you guys ever dealt with a threat of this nature before that's kind of forced you to cancel in-person learning and services? Have you dealt with threats before and then to this scale?
Steve might be able to know his better in terms of history. I've been in my role for a couple of years, and Steve's
He does an outstanding job at Bethel. One of our responsibilities is for JCRC is for overall community security. Folks may remember back in 2017 a series of bomb threats against Jewish community centers throughout the world, St. Paul and Minneapolis, which received one of those bomb threats. Certainly that was a significant period. Conversely, it turned out to be in Israel who was bomb threats. But putting that aside, that was something that was highly disruptive of the community for reasons you can imagine. The ACCs, young people interregulating, for social and cultural reasons. So, fortunately, we had that experience in addressing the JCC bomb threats back in 2007. Since then, of course, we've had developments throughout the United States. I said before, fortunate to live in the time which we do as American Jews. Nevertheless, we've seen the attack in Pittsburgh, the attack in San Diego, attacks out on the East Coast. So at the same time, we're mindful that the world will attack ICE forces in all the regions globally. It's something that we have to pay attention to. But at the same time, keep in mind that in this country, wonderful relationship with law enforcement cities, other communities and organizations to keep us all safe.
just to kind of go back to that for 1 second, would this be the first time for this specific synagogue that in-person services would be canceled due to a threat?
It's the first that I'm aware of. Doesn't mean it's the first that there's been, but it's the first that I'm aware of.
And keeping in mind, they're still in a cyber election.
Right. Right.
So will everything be remote for the foreseeable future, or how do you determine when it's going to be safe to return?
I think it's where we leverage our partnership with the city, the St. Louis Park Police Department, JCRC, and the ongoing investigation to make sure we're following their recommendations to keep people as safe as possible.
Obviously, with Yom Kippur coming up next week, another high attendance time at the synagogue, what's the plan in terms of when a decision might be made for services, whether they'll be able to be held in person or not?
I can tell you that it was late last night that I was informed of the threat that came in, and so we're, call it 18 hours into this, and there's already a very active investigation going on. So it does appear to be a priority. It appears that it's going quickly, and that they're trying to uncover as much as they can as quickly as possible, understanding the fact that we want to get people back together, but we need to follow recommendations and guidance that allow us to make sure we're keeping people safe.
I think one other thing that I would just sort of go back to, a couple of years ago when the synagogue shooting happened in Pittsburgh, we had an interfaith vigil here in St. Louis Park. It was held at Westwood Lutheran Church, and Buddhist monks from Wat Prom were there lighting prayer candles, and there were maybe 1,000, 1,200 people in that room. And when I got up and I gave some brief remarks, I talked about the fact that this is not something that is, the impact of this is not limited to the Jewish community, and the support is not limited to the Jewish community. In fact, I think the analogy that I used was, you can imagine paddling in heavy winds, right? You're in a canoe paddling in heavy winds. I asked all of the people who were not Jewish in that room to stand up, and I told everyone who was seated, these are the islands that you should look for when the winds kick up. These are the folks that are going to look out for you and protect you. So all of our neighborhoods, all of our community are all engaged in trying to support this community and our police to find out more about what happened and make sure that they can get back to life as normal as possible, especially during these times.
That's a good point. There are a lot of houses nearby. Is there any impact or concern for neighbors that they might be in a area of danger?
The neighbors who live just north of us here are well aware of this dynamic, but we are always communicating with them about any real threats that we have, actionable information that we can share with them. But we're not shy about making sure folks know about these things.
So they're not like locking down or
No.
anything?
Not that I'm aware of. There's not a lockdown.
Maybe to make a point of personal privilege, it's on my mind. It just so happens that Glenwood is the sentencing of the defendant Hari Darrell for the bombing case, convicted of bombs, powerful bombs that were placed in the Islamic Center in Richfield, and we should all be proud of the investigation, prosecution, and successful guilty criminal conviction from the jury for it. But it goes to the point that there's sort of a Mobius strip of security, right? That we should be grateful that in Minnesota, attack against Hamas, who has resolutely investigated and prosecuted, and actually can speak at the sentencing hearing because we submitted a letter arguing for an upward departure for the defendant because of the heinousness of the act, attacking a house of worship, because of the impact that radiates out from such terrorism. That's what it is. Terrorism displaced the body of the mosque to the Islamic Center. And I want people to appreciate the fact that there's a great solidarity amongst the religious communities. Even so support each other, just as there's great solidarity in the Jewish communities. I want people to keep, that's important for folks, to keep in mind.
Final question from me, but I think people do have a heightened awareness about threats right now with the anniversary of 9/11 being tomorrow. Is there any indication that the timing ties into that, or do you have any thoughts on the timing of this threat and then obviously the big picture of 9/11 and 20th anniversary being tomorrow?
The quick answer that I would give on that is I'm not sure anti-Semites sort of plan their schedule necessarily, right? bigotry and anti-Semitism doesn't necessarily need holidays or calendars to express itself. I don't know that there's a connection between them. We're still obviously in the early stages of that discussion and investigation, so I don't have any information.
You might have said the investigation is conducted by how many groups? Or?
I'll be sending information.
Oh, you're getting it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.